All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we're having some Wi-Fi problems.
Oh.
All right, so in the case of Street versus Taylor, we're going to go ahead and get started. Are the parties here and ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
First, let's take up any housekeeping matters, and then we'll move on to pre-trial before moving to opening statements.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Sarah Papantonio, and I'm here together with my co-counsel, Ms. Claire Washburn. Together, we represent the plaintiff, Jordan Street, in this case. Now, prior to moving to substantive matters, Your Honor, we just have a few preliminary matters that we'd like to take up with the court.
Go ahead.
Now, I understand that we're working in a new virtual zone here, and like you just said, we might have some Wi-Fi issues throughout this trial. And if at any point you feel like as if I'm lagging, or if you miss something that I might say, I offer that the court just raise their right hand for a few seconds as to notify me that you might have missed something so I can go back and draw attention to it.
Okay.
In addition to that, Your Honor, while we each might be, thousands of miles away from each other, understanding that we can't approach the bench for objections, we still ask that we do constructively approach so that our arguments are heard outside the presence of any witness that might be still within the room. And then that concludes all our preliminary matters, Your Honor. We did have a pre-trial meeting in which myself and opposing counsel discussed, stipulated to certain matters, and I'm sure he'd be very willing to talk about what we discussed.
Okay.
Certainly, Your Honor, if I may make introductions for the court as well as cover just a few housekeeping matters at this time.
Very well. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. On behalf of the defendant, Coach Reese Taylor, my name is Austin Wallach, and I'm joined by my co-counsel.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Zua Zhao.
Good afternoon.
Now, Ms. Papantonio noted that this is a rather unusual environment that we're in today. So I just ask, does the court have any preference as to whether we sit or stand, or even if we move around, or maybe we just do so at our discretion?
You're welcome to do whatever you would like within the boundaries of your camera.
Yes, Your Honor. In addition, there are exhibits in this case marked 1 through 22. I've spoken to opposing counsel, and if it's amenable to the court, we'd like those to retain their markings today.
Yes, that's acceptable.
Thank you. To that end, Your Honor, there are also some exhibits in this case, 16 through 19, as well as Exhibit 21, that have been pre-admitted via pretrial order. I just wanted to make sure that the court was aware of that before we proceed today.
Yes, I am.
With that, Your Honor, I also have one last matter. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I've prepared for my opening statement today. I've shown it to opposing counsel. She has no objection to it. I just want to make sure that's okay for me to use with the court.
Ms. Papantonio, you're okay with this?
Yes, Your Honor. In addition, I'll be publishing a photo of the victim in this case, and opposing counsel has agreed to that as well.
That's
for
correct.
my opening statements, excuse me.
Very well then.
With that, Your Honor, we do have the one stipulated motion that we were able to come to an agreement to, if you're ready to hear it.
Other than this, do you have anything else from the plaintiff's side before letting Mr. Wallach talk about the stipulated motion?
No, Your Honor, the plaintiff's ready to proceed.
Very well, Mr. Wallach.
Your Honor, based on the evidence in this case, both parties were able to agree to a stipulation that there will be no testimony elicited today about subsequent remedial measures that were taken after the death of the decedent in this case. Specifically, the school and Coach Taylor took measures to ensure that there were tents put up at a soccer field and that Gatorade was provided to players. We want to let the court know that neither party is going to go into that today.
All right.
With that, we're ready to proceed.
Okay. Just a matter of housekeeping from the court. I will be keeping time. I will give you a time update as soon as the plaintiff's case in chief closes, and then also at the end of the defense case in chief before closing argument, so that you can kind of taper your expectations and make sure you're on track. We're going to try to get through with a minimal amount of breaks. So you are welcome to grab a drink of water and take a quick break while I am doing the math. Hopefully it will not take me too long. But other than that, we're going to try to move through things fairly quickly today.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, would you like to make your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Counsel. Your Honor. A mother has lost her daughter. See, instead of writing words of congratulations on social media, this mother writes her daughter's obituary. Instead of proudly cheering for her daughter on her graduation stage, this mother cries as she sees her daughter being carried off in a casket. Instead of waving goodbye to a kid starting her first day of college, this mother says goodbye when she lowers her daughter's body 6 feet into the ground. And the saddest thing is that this didn't have to happen. See, by the end of this trial, you'll see that the conditions, the contact, and the lack of care are what led to Rory's death. Conditions Rory was practicing in, the contact the defendant subjected her to, and the lack of care a coach showed for one of her players. See, this is Rory. She's a good student. She's a star player of Waco High School varsity soccer team. See, her dream is to become a Division I athlete. You'll learn today that Rory's life was taken because of the defendant's failure to keep her safe. The evidence will show that the defendant subjected this young woman to humiliation, forced her to endure wave after wave of violent physical contact until she couldn't take it anymore. You heard the defendant. You'll hear the defendant. The very person who was meant to protect her stood there in silence as Rory took her last breaths. So to understand why this happened, we have to go back to September of 2018. See, today it's just like any other day. Rory's headed to soccer practice. And Rory, she's got talent. But just like most people, she's got good days and she's got bad days. And today, it was one of those tough days. See, at soccer practice, it was hot. She was missing a few shots here and there. She was messing up practices. And guess what? Coach noticed. See, Coach Taylor is the defendant in this case. And Coach Taylor, she's not satisfied with Rory's performance. She starts yelling, tells Rory, you're useless on this field. That she's gonna run, I'm gonna run you until you pass out. We gotta take a step back and talk about that for a minute. Because Reese Taylor, she is a grown woman, and you're gonna see how she speaks to her players. The people that she's supposed to be a mentor to. You'll see that the defendant, the soccer practice is about discipline. It's about teaching people lessons rather than growth and learning. See, the defendant, she sends Rory to run what's called the Burma Road. It's a punishment. It's where students sprint 30 yards, dribble the ball for another 30 yards, and then score on an open goal. And then after that, they crawl on their hands and knees for 60 yards back to the starting point. It's 120 yards total over and over and over again until Coach Taylor's appetite for punishment is satisfied. You're going to hear about Burma Road a lot today, and when you do, I want you to understand that this defendant had kids crawling on their hands and knees, sometimes for the length of a football field. And how does it affect Rory that day? See, later you're going to see an expert report of Dr. Reagan McConaughey. This report is going to walk you through each of the many symptoms that Rory was feeling that day before her death. An unusual paleness, some chest tightening. She was breathing heavy, struggling. Lifeless, almost. All signs that Rory was having a heat stroke. Now you're also going to see a toxicology report. And what that toxicology report shows is a nominal amount of cocaine in Rory's system when she died. An amount of cocaine so low that experts are going to tell us that it had nothing to do with Rory's death. See, instead, you'll see an opinion that'll tell you that Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion at the hands of Coach Taylor. And that's because bear crawling the length of a football field wasn't enough for this defendant. She'll tell you that Rory needed more discipline. You'll hear that Rory never gets a break, never gets a drink of water. Instead, this defendant has everyone line up on that team in a single file line, all of them against Rory. And one by one, they're told to slide tackle Rory. And a slide tackle is exactly what it sounds like. It's a tackle. You'll hear how this drill is physical. It's painful. Players knock Rory to the ground hard. But the defendant, see, she's still not satisfied. She yanks Rory up by her jersey and forces her back into position. And then the next player approaches. See, 15 times, Rory is knocked to the ground, and each time she gets up, She struggles until that last hit. See, this time, Rory collapses. She convulses. Her body trembles, she shakes, and sudden stillness. You'll hear that it's there that Rory takes her last breath. As the defendant, the woman who is supposed to be protecting her, stands by and watches. The evidence will show that this defendant could have stopped this punishment, but instead chose not to. You'll see that she failed to recognize the signs of Rory's struggle on the day of September 7th. And as plaintiff in today's case, it's our burden to prove that to you, to prove based on a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant failed to keep Rory safe during practice, causing her to overexert herself and die. We will absolutely meet that burden here today, because once you hear about the conditions that Rory faced, what she had to practice in, when you hear about the contact the defendant subjected her to, and the lack of care this coach showed for a player, you'll see that this didn't have to happen. And you'll find that Coach Taylor is liable for the death of Rory.
Your Honor, before I proceed, may I take a brief moment to set up my well, as it were?
Sure.
Thank you. May I proceed?
You may.
Your Honor, from the second that both parties walked into this courtroom today, there was a lot that we agreed on. We agree with the plaintiff that Miss Street's death is truly a tragedy. We agree that she died during soccer practice on a hot September day 2 years ago. We even agree that she died from heat exhaustion. And we agree with what Ms. Papantonio said just a moment ago, that this didn't have to happen. But what we don't agree on, and what the evidence is going to show today, is that Miss Street's death was not caused by the actions of Coach Reese Taylor. It was, in fact, the actions of Miss Street herself. Because what no one saw in this case, that's what actually killed her. Now, it's the afternoon of September 7th, 2018. As the Waco High School girls varsity soccer team laces up their cleats in the locker room before an afternoon practice, Rory Street hides a secret. Earlier in the day, without telling anyone, she tried cocaine, a very dangerous drug. And as cocaine courses through her veins, she runs out onto that soccer field with the rest of the team, feeling a little bit funny, but ready to practice. The first hour goes by largely without any issue. But after a while, Coach Taylor notices that Rory is starting to goof off. Just like any other time that she goofs off, Coach Taylor makes her practice extra hard and run Burma Road, a drill. Rory, at that point, she's still slacking. So Coach Taylor lines up the team to practice slide tackles on her. Now, any other day, at any other practice, Rory Street would have been fine. She was a soccer superstar. Some say that she had superhuman abilities. But on this particular day, it was her secret, the cocaine that no one saw, that killed her. And the plaintiff today has the burden of proof. They have to prove to Your Honor that Coach Taylor not only owed Miss Street a duty of care, but that she should have seen Miss Street's death coming, that it was foreseeable. Now, Your Honor, you simply can't know what you don't see. And the plaintiff won't be able to meet that burden today. That'll become clear if you keep 3 simple things in mind throughout trial. First, the secret. Second, the effect. And third, the silence. Now, I'd like to take those each in turn, starting with that first little note, the secret. Rory Street was a star soccer player. Like I said, she was a superstar athlete with abilities that far surpassed anyone else on her team. She was rarely ever in trouble. By all accounts, she was a great kid. The evidence will show that nothing Miss Street ever did led her coach to think that she was troubled. Nothing led her coach to believe that Miss Street would abuse or take any sort of drugs. Nothing about what Miss Street did or what she put into her body on September 7th, 2018 was foreseeable to Coach Taylor. And that's why that day, Coach Taylor treated Rory Street like she would any other day at any other practice. She pushed Rory. She made her work hard. She made her do those tough drills. Now, Your Honor, today you're going to meet Coach Taylor. She's been coaching varsity soccer at Waco High for 7 years now. She's dedicated to her players. She pushes them like Rory Street to always play harder and do better, to rise to the challenge. But unfortunately for Coach Taylor, what she didn't know and didn't see is what ultimately led to the death of Rory Street. Now, as the defense, I want to make something perfectly clear right up front. Your Honor, you're going to hear about Coach Taylor's behavior today, and you might hear things about the coach that you don't like. You might not agree with how the coach conducted her practice or how she pushed those kids. And throughout trial today, we won't hide from the fact that these drills may have gone too far. But that in and of itself does not make her negligent. Because Coach Taylor can't be held responsible for something that she couldn't have foreseen, couldn't have known, couldn't have even possibly dreamt of. That her star player was using cocaine. And that moves us to that second little thing I'd like you to keep in mind today. The effect. Now, we'll show you today that Miss Street, she had a significant amount of cocaine in her system even 4 hours after she passed away. Blood tests showed that she had 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine left over in her blood. And both experts today will agree to the results of those blood tests. Now, it's that cocaine that was combined with the heat and the physical exertion that caused Miss Street's death. An expert report that's already been admitted to the court today will show that heat, exertion, and recreational drug use can work together to further increase the risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. For example, cocaine use can result in hyperthermia, which inhibits the body's natural cooling process. So if cocaine use is combined with overexertion in extremely hot conditions, then it would exacerbate the risk of heat stroke. Simply put, Miss Street died not just because of the heat or just because of Coach Taylor pushing her, but because of the effect that the cocaine added to those things. And that's why that third little thing to remember is so important. The silence. Even though Coach Taylor admittedly pushed hard during practice that day, the evidence will show she had no reason not to. Coach Taylor had no reason to believe that there was that increased risk of heat stroke. No reason to know that cocaine was adding a factor onto what was already going on. And unfortunately, Miss Street stayed silent. You'll learn today, Coach Taylor always made water available for the team. They just had to ask. But Miss Street never did. Coach Taylor, she always let that team take breaks whenever they needed one. They just had to ask. And again, on September 7th, 2018, Miss Street never did. Her silence guaranteed that Coach Taylor would never know she needed a break, would never know that something was wrong. But it wasn't just her silence you'll hear about. Pay attention today to the testimony of Miss Street's best friend, Aubrey Saracen. Now, she was right there on the soccer field with her that terrible day. And I'd like you to listen to what she has to say about Miss Street's death the very next day. She'll say it was sudden, that it came out of nowhere, that she didn't see it coming. And her testimony will leave you with the question, if her own best friend couldn't see this as a possibility, how could the coach? Now, Your Honor, today's case, it is no doubt a tragedy. The plaintiff lost her child. Miss Street's teammates, they lost a friend. And Coach Taylor lost a young talent that she hoped would one day grow into a superstar. But today, the plaintiff is going to ask you to find Coach Taylor liable for something she didn't see and couldn't have possibly known, while asking you to ignore the things that the plaintiff did in this case. All the while, the unfortunate truth is that it's what no one saw that killed her. The cocaine, not the coach. As such, when I come before you at the end of trial today, I'll ask that Your Honor return the only verdict that is both supported by the evidence and demanded by the law. Find the defendant not liable. Thank you.
Ms. Capantonio, call your first witness.
At this time, the plaintiff calls Aubrey Saracen.
Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. All right, Ms. Saracen, please turn and introduce your, well, I guess you can't turn, but let's go ahead and introduce yourself to the judge.
I'm Aubrey Saracen.
Ms. Saracen, did you know Rory Street?
I did. She was one of my best friends.
How did you know her?
She and I had played soccer together forever since we were little, and we were teammates on Waco High's team.
Now, you mentioned that you played soccer together. What was Rory like as a soccer player?
She was incredible. Honestly, if she hadn't died, I think she would have gone D1 or even maybe pro.
Now, I want to back up just a minute and talk about you. Where do you live?
I live in Waco.
Now, you and Rory, you played soccer together. How long have you been playing soccer together?
Since we were little. We played club soccer, youth soccer, everything until high school.
Did you play on the same high school team?
We did. We were on the Waco varsity team.
Now, you told us Rory was good at soccer. Did you have any plans to play college soccer?
I'm going to Rice in the fall. I'm going to go for engineering, so I thought I might walk on. I'm not sure yet.
Okay, now we know Rory has passed away.
Yeah.
Were you there when she died?
I was.
Where was it?
It was on the Waco High practice soccer field.
Was Coach present?
She was.
Who's Coach Taylor?
She's our soccer coach. She's really tough, but she gets the job done.
I want to talk about that day, the day Rory died. When did practice start?
Around 3:15 after school.
And what was the weather like on this day?
Hot and sunny. Waco in September is not a cool place.
Now, take us to practice. What were you doing that day?
We were doing a scrimmage that day. So basically half the team was playing against the other half.
And were you scrimmaging as well?
No, I missed a couple of goals. And so coach sent me over to do Burma Road.
Describe Burma Road for us.
So Burma Road is this drill that's famous at Waco High. It's basically a punishment for anything that you mess up on the field. And so you start out, you run 30 yards, and then you dribble a ball for 30 yards, and then you kick it into an open goal, and then you have to bear crawl 60 yards back to the starting line. And then you just repeat it over and over and over until coach says stop.
Your Honor, permission to publish Exhibit 2 by way of screen sharing?
We have no objection, Your Honor.
To it being published or to it being admitted?
Either, Your Honor.
Let's publish it first.
Now, Ms. Saracen, tell us what we're looking at with Exhibit 2.
So that looks like a bird's eye view of Waco High and the soccer fields. The blue box is where the regular practice field is. That's where the scrimmage was going on. And then the red box is where we would do Burma Road.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the practice field that you play on?
Yeah.
Your Honor, at this time, we enter into evidence what's been pre-marked for identification as Plaintiffs 2.
Any objection, Mr. Wallet?
At this time, no objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 2 is admitted.
Okay, now I'm going to have you describe that again. And go ahead and just tell us, on the day this happened, where were you?
I was in the red portion on Burma Road.
And at the start of practice, where was Rory?
She was on the field, in the box.
Okay. And about how far would you say is it from the blue box to the red box?
From where all the people were, it was about 20 yards apart.
Were you able to see what was happening in the scrimmage area?
Yes, but I was running, so I was a little bit distracted.
Okay, well, let's go back to that running, back to that what you call Burma Road. You said that it was used as a punishment. How long would that punishment last?
However long coach wanted.
And why were you running on Burma Road that day?
I guess I had missed a pass or missed a goal. I don't really remember.
Okay, let's talk about Rory when she was on the scrimmage field, when she was on the practice field. Tell us, what's your first memory? What was happening between the defendant and Rory?
I remember coach yelling at Rory. I remember she said that Rory was useless and that she needed to go run Burma.
Now, was this just a short outburst of yelling?
No, coach was pissed off. She was yelling for a while.
Now, you said she was making her run Burma. Is this at the same time that you were over there?
Yeah, we were together.
Okay. When you and Rory were over at Burma Road together, was coach or the trainer watching you two?
I don't know. She could have been, but she was probably focused on the scrimmage.
And describe for us what you observed when Rory came over to run with you.
She looked pretty pale and she did look like she wasn't feeling very well.
What do you mean by she wasn't feeling well?
She just looked like she was sick, like she, like I said, pale, just not like herself.
Well, let me ask, did she tell you something was wrong with her?
Yeah, I asked her what was wrong because I was concerned, and she said that her chest hurt and that she was feeling kind of funny.
And in those moments that she's telling you, something's wrong, my chest hurts, I feel funny, what did you do?
I kept running Burma. Usually when coach hears somebody complaining about feeling bad during practice, she makes you run more drills. And so I didn't want to make it worse for her.
At any point okay. Now, tell us what happened next.
So after a little while, I guess coach wasn't happy with how she was running Burma, and she called her over to do a slide tackle drill that I had never seen before.
Now, from Burma Road, were you able to see what was happening with this drill?
Yes.
What was happening?
So basically coach had everybody line up in a single file line facing Rory. And then one by one, she would dribble a ball down the field and they would all run at her one at a time and perform a slide tackle.
Okay, we need to stop for a second and talk about what's a slide tackle.
Sure. So it's a pretty common tactic in soccer where you try to get the ball out from under one of the players by kind of coming at them from the side with your feet and kicking the ball away. But sometimes the person sliding in will also knock the player down.
Are slide tackles in and of themselves, are they dangerous?
They're not dangerous in and of themselves, but they can be dangerous if the person falls and hits something.
Okay, Rory's been running Burma Road. right? And then Coach Taylor calls her over for this slide tackle drill. During any of that time, did the defendant ever allow Rory to take a water break?
No.
As far as you know, was there shade for her to catch her breath?
Mhm.
Was there anyone other than Rory in this slide tackle drill supposed to be dribbling the ball to be tackled?
No, she was the only one dribbling.
So in other words, it was just her.
Mhm. Yes.
And now is this drill, this slide tackling drill, is it something you've ever seen before?
No, I think Coach made it up that day just to punish Rory.
Okay, I want you to take us to those first moments of the drill. How did it play out?
Well, I mean, as you can probably expect, Rory was pretty tired from running Burma. And so when the first person collided with her in the tackle, she fell over. And I think she was maybe having trouble getting back up or something. And Coach kind of pulled her up by her jersey and then told her to get back to the start and do it again.
So Coach pulled her up by her jersey. Is it fair to say that Coach was watching this slide tackling drill?
Absolutely.
Did Coach at any point ever leave the slide tackling drill?
I don't think so. It was her thing.
And at any point, could you tell if Rory mentioned to Coach that she wasn't feeling well?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Now, how many times, like how long did this go on for?
I think it was about 15 or so times.
And when Rory would fall to the ground, what would Coach say?
Coach would help her up and then tell her to get back to the start and do it again every time.
You said this went on 15 times.
Yeah.
During any of those 15 slide tackles, did you see a water break?
No.
During any of those 15 slide tackles, did Coach ever run and grab Merriweather, your trainer?
No.
At any time, did Coach Taylor say stop, say that's enough?
No.
At any point, did the defendant stop and ask Rory if she was okay?
No.
As far as you observed, at any point, did the defendant show any concern for the safety of Rory?
No.
Okay, I want you to take us to the last moments of this slide tackling drill. What happened to Rory on the 15th time she was hit by one of those players?
It's kind of hard for me to talk about, but she fell to the ground like she had the other times. And then she started kind of shaking, convulsing, and moaning. It was almost like she was having some sort of seizure or something. And Merriweather, our trainer, came over and asked somebody to call an ambulance. And we called the ambulance, but the ambulance was too late. And at some point, Rory just stopped moving and she was dead.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
You can proceed.
Good afternoon, Ms. Saracen. I'd like to start by talking about what you and others knew about Miss Street, okay? Now, you'd known her for years at this point, hadn't you? I'm sorry, can you speak up, Ms. Saracen? I can't hear you all that well.
Yes.
You'd played soccer together,
Yes.
and you went to school together, didn't you?
Yes.
If you weren't at her house, it's safe to say she was at your house.
Absolutely.
You two were thick as thieves.
We were.
Now, in addition to being best friends, you had known each other basically from the time you were born, right?
Our whole lives, yeah.
In all the time that you knew her, you never saw her doing cocaine at school, did you?
No.
Never saw her do cocaine at a soccer practice, did you?
No.
In fact, you don't even think, prior to September 7th anyway, you didn't think that Rory was the kind of person that would do cocaine.
No, I didn't.
So it's safe to say then, when the two of you walked onto the soccer field that afternoon, you had no idea that she had cocaine in her system.
I didn't.
Based on everything that you saw, she never told the trainer that she had cocaine in her system.
No.
She never told the coach that she had cocaine in her system.
No.
Now, let's turn to what you and others could see during the practice that was going on that day. Like you said, you were there over on Burma Road.
Right.
And that's roughly, what, 20 yards? Is that about right?
That's right.
And this was not the first time that someone had been sent to Burma Road, right?
No, that's a Waco High tradition.
Yeah, right. Like you mentioned, it's something that happens pretty often.
Yes.
Now, at no prior point that day had anyone passed out running Burma Road.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. May we approach?
You may.
Your Honor, at this point, opposing counsel is going into a line of questioning about what happened prior to the day in question. Now, the fact finder in this case, of course, you will be provided jury instructions that ask that on the day in question, what happened. So anything that happened prior to this day, whether or not there was someone who passed out from heat exhaustion, is not relevant to coach's actions on the day in question.
Your Honor, yes, Your Honor. I said prior that day, not prior to that day. But moreover, that would still be relevant even in instances prior to this, because the question that Your Honor has to answer today is the question of foreseeability. And foreseeability is relevant in this case, whether or not someone had passed out doing this drill before, because that would go directly to the conduct that Coach Taylor engaged in, which ultimately would determine whether or not he was actually negligent that day.
Ms. Antonio, your objection's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Saracen, let's go back to my question for just a moment. Prior that day, earlier that day, no one had passed out running Burma Road.
No.
Safe to say no one had died running Burma Road that day.
No.
And on that day, you had to run Burma Road longer than Miss Street did.
That's right. But she was playing in the scrimmage while I was running.
You'd been running Burma Road for about 15 minutes before she got sent over as well, right?
That's right.
Ms. Saracen, you did not take cocaine before practice, did you?
No.
You did not pass out at Burma Road.
No.
You were not struggling nearly as much as Miss Street was.
No.
Now, you told us on direct examination that she looked pale and that she was shaking. That's right?
That's correct.
But this isn't the first time that you sent any sort of messages or talked about how she looked that day, is it?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, you remember the very next day, you actually sent a text message about what you saw.
Yes.
You mentioned the incident of when your friend died.
Right.
And this was a text message you sent.
Calls for hearsay.
Response, Mr. Rowlett?
Yes, Your Honor. Firstly, this isn't being used for the truth of the matter asserted. Rather, Your Honor, this is being used for impeachment purposes. This witness's testimony today differs, both her deposition and her testimony today differ from what she said immediately following this event. I'm impeaching her with prior inconsistent statements, which goes towards her credibility in this case, not for the truth of the matter. But what's more, Your Honor, this would fall under a hearsay exception, which is that it's an excited utterance. If I may make a proffer, this witness's statements themselves say at the time she sent them, she was still shocked.
Your Honor, may I be heard on that?
Briefly.
Your Honor, this is an improper impeachment. The witness was confronted with Rory was feeling shaky and she was feeling pale. Now, the contents of the text messages talk about the incident happening. It says it was also sudden. She collapsed out of nowhere. That is not parallel to the questions that she was confronted with. In addition, Your Honor, this is absolutely not an excited utterance. An excited utterance is a response to a stimulus that occurs within moments of the statement. This is 24 hours after the statement was made. It does not fall under the hearsay exception of excited utterance.
Sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, let's move on just a little bit and talk, Ms. Saracen, about what Rory told people that day.
Okay.
Now, when she was running Burma Road and you say she looked like she was struggling, she never told Coach Taylor she needed a break, right?
No.
When you were over there on Burma Road with her, you didn't hear her ask for any water.
No, but like I said, coach probably would have made her run something harder. So I get that.
I'm not asking you to speculate, ma'am. I'm just asking you what you saw and what you heard, okay? You never heard her ask for water.
No.
When she was sent over from Burma Road to then do that slide tackling drill, she didn't ask for a break in between those two drills, did she?
No, I don't think she could have.
You didn't hear her ask for water at that point.
No.
You didn't hear her ask for the trainer at that point.
No, she didn't ask for anything.
And you didn't hear her tell Coach Taylor at that point that she had taken cocaine and wasn't feeling well.
No.
Now, during that slide tackling drill, when you mentioned she had fallen to the ground several times, when Coach Taylor was helping her back up, she never said, "Hey, Coach, I need a break."
No, she never asked for a break that day.
When Coach Taylor was helping her back up, you never heard her say, "Coach, I need some water."
No.
You never heard her say, "Hey, Coach, can I go see the trainer?"
No.
In fact, you never heard her say anything about how bad she was feeling that day.
She had told me that she was feeling bad.
But with regard to the coach and to the trainer, you never heard her say anything to them, did you?
Say anything to them.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Your Honor, I pass the witness.
Ms. Harrison, a lot of questions were directed at what Rory did or did not tell Coach. So I want to dive into that. Now, opposing counsel said Rory never told Coach she needed to stop. But as far as you could tell, what was Rory's body language telling Coach?
I mean, she looked like she was about to fall over. She was almost lifeless. Like, if I were Coach, I would have seen that Rory was looking like she was feeling bad and not make her do that.
Also, opposing
Objection,
counsel,
Your Honor. Improper opinion. I'm sorry for the timeliness. My microphone there didn't turn back on. May we approach?
Okay.
This witness is making an improper opinion, is basically speculating about what she would have done in this coach's position, that she would have noticed this. That's going to the ultimate issue today, and that's not an opinion that she can render.
Ms. Papantonio, response?
the witnesses is testifying to what she observed. The question was specifically pointed on based of your observation. You know, what did you observe of what was happening?
May I respond?
Did.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I thought I heard you say that you sustained the objection. Were you waiting for me to respond?
No, I sustained your objection.
Oh, I apologize.
Yes,
I didn't hear that. Now, opposing counsel says that Coach Taylor was helping Rory off the ground. As far as you could tell, did Rory have an option to stand back up?
I don't think so.
And how many times did Rory have to get back up off the ground?
15 times.
No further questions.
And I have no recross, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused, Your Honor?
Yes, Ms. Saragin, you can step down.
Your Honor, at this time, we ask to publish by way of reading in the testimony of Jordan Street and her deposition.
You may.
Now turning court and counsel's attention to page 2, lines 15 to 16. Question, do you have any children?
I did. My daughter, Rory.
Page 2, lines 23 to 24. Question, what happened to Rory?
She died at soccer practice on September 7th, 2018.
Page 4, lines 14 to 22. Question, was soccer something that the two of you shared?
You know, I played soccer in college, so I already loved the game. But I didn't care what the sport was. I just loved having a kid that was into sports of any kind. I loved getting up on the weekends when she was little to go kick the ball in the backyard and let her try to dribble it past me. I loved talking about games and strategy. It brought back so many memories of my playing days. But this was even better because it was my kid and it made her so happy.
Page 7, lines 19 through page 8, line 2. Question: when you were playing soccer at Waco High School, did you ever have to run Burma Road?
Hell yeah, we did. I remember doing that when we were dogging it or if we weren't in the correct position or something. Coach would send us off to run Burma Road. But I'll tell you this, none of my coaches ever made me or any other kid keep going when it was obvious that we were exhausted. Discipline is one thing, but that is just dangerous.
Your Honor, that concludes our reading in of Jordan Street's deposition. If opposing counsel has no further publications that they would like to admit, then we will move on to Exhibit 21.
Mr. Wallach, do you have any cross-examination for Ms. Street?
Nothing that we'd like to add to that, Your Honor. Thank you.
Then at this time, Your Honor, we ask to publish Exhibit 21, which is a pre-admitted weather report.
You may.
2:51 p.m., 100 degrees Fahrenheit. 3:51 p.m., 103 degrees Fahrenheit. 4:51 p.m., 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
Now we ask the court if we may publish in the autopsy report, which is Exhibit 14, which has been stipulated as authentic and is a public record in this case.
Any objection, Mr. Wallach?
No objection, Your Honor.
Go ahead. Exhibit 14 will be admitted.
Exhibit 14, autopsy report. From the anatomic and laboratory findings and pertinent history, I ascribe the death to sudden cardiac death.
And finally, Your Honor, Exhibit 16, which is a pre-admitted report from Mr. McConaughey, an expert report in this case.
Go ahead.
Based on all the above, it is my opinion, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion and/or a heat stroke on September 8, 2018. It is also my opinion, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Rory Street's death was not a result of cocaine use.
And with that, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests their case.
Your Honor, before the defense begins with its case, I actually have a motion that I'd like the court to hear.
Okay, we will hear your motion and any response to that. Then I will tally up the times and give y'all an update. Y'all can have a couple minutes for a break there, and then we'll start with the defense case in chief.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense moves from judgment as a matter of law pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 50. Under Federal Rule 50, even viewing all the evidence today in the light most favorable to the non-moving party, that is the plaintiff, no reasonable fact finder, today yourself, Your Honor, could find in favor of the plaintiff. That's been made clear today because the plaintiff can't show that there's proximate cause in this case. They had to prove proximate cause, showing not only that there was a natural and continuous sequence producing an event, and that without such event, the death in this case would not have occurred, but further, they had to show that it was foreseeable to Coach Taylor on the day in question. Your Honor, Coach Reese Taylor did not cause Ms. Street's death because what no one saw is what killed her. Now, although you didn't hear live testimony from those expert witnesses, you also have the expert witness for the defense. You have their report in evidence today. And both of the experts agree in those reports. Ms. Street, she did die from heart failure, but our expert toxicologist notes that in addition to that cocaine being found in her system, well, her stroke and cardiac arrest were caused, at least in part, by that cocaine. Since Ms. Street kept her cocaine use a secret, Coach Taylor had no way of knowing and treated her exactly the same as he would have any other day. We heard that no one else had passed out running Burma Road. No one else had died doing that. No one else had passed out at that practice. No one else had died at those practices. As a result, Your Honor, there's just no way that even the most generous fact finder could see that this was foreseeable to Coach Taylor, that one of his star players who showed incredible athletic prowess would suddenly collapse and die out of nowhere. As such, we ask that the court grant this motion.
Ms. Papantonio, do you have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. In viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the non-movement, which is us in this case, It is foreseeable that operating a soccer practice within 105-degree heat, it can lead to heat exhaustion. In addition to that, an expert testified that heat exhaustion is what occurred here. Now, Your Honor, it's even more foreseeable that when you combine heat exhaustion with sprints, with contact, with player-to-player contact, that injury is foreseeable. Coach Taylor was within feet of Rory for much of this time in question. She had the ability to see what was happening to Rory, to see the struggling. Even then, we know that she was struggling so much that Coach Taylor had to pull Rory off the ground. It is absolutely foreseeable that a player struggling in such heat with symptoms of heat exhaustion could be fatal. And therefore, we've absolutely met the threshold standard that a reasonable fact finder could rule in our favor, find in our favor.
Your motion for judgment as a matter of law is denied.
Yes, Your Honor.
Take a 2-minute break and start defense's defense's case at 2:56. I mean,
Yes.
8. Okay, are both parties ready to proceed with the defense case in chief?
The defense is ready, Your Honor.
Plaintiff is ready as well, Your Honor.
Okay. Plaintiff, you have used you have 33 minutes, 58 seconds remaining. Defense, you have 37 minutes, 55 seconds remaining.
Yes, Your Honor.
You can start your case in chief whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Before we get into any live witness testimony today, I'd like to read onto the record a highlighted portion of Exhibit 18. I mentioned that just a moment ago. It's a copy of the defense expert's report in this case. And as I noted, this has already been admitted today. I'd just like to highlight 2 small sections from the report for Your Honor.
You can proceed.
May I publish?
You may.
Now, Your Honor, I'm turning to the second page of this document, here in the section titled Overview of Opinions. In relevant part, this section reads, Rory Street's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine. And below that on the page, there's a table that lists the symptoms that can be found associated with cocaine use. They are constricted blood vessels, dilated pupils, nausea and vomiting, raised body temperature and blood pressure, fast or irregular heartbeat, tremors and twitches, restlessness, and chest pain. Having highlighted that portion of the document, I'm now prepared to call our live witness, the defendant, Coach Reese Taylor.
All right.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
I'm Reese Taylor.
How old are you, Miss Taylor?
I'm 49.
And where do you currently live?
I live in Waco, Texas. I was actually born and raised here.
Did you go to college?
I did. I went to A&M and I got my degree in physical education.
Why did you choose to study physical education?
Well, I've always wanted to be a coach. And so from the moment I got at A&M, I knew that I had to study physical education.
You said you always wanted to be a coach. Do you coach currently?
Yeah, I'm actually a health teacher at Waco High in Waco, but I also coach the varsity soccer team.
And how long have you been coaching the varsity soccer team at Waco?
I've been doing that for 6 years.
Now, having coached for 6 years at Waco, do you take any steps to protect your players?
Oh, absolutely.
What sort of steps do you take to make sure that they're safe during practices?
Sure. We do things like make sure water is always available on the sidelines. We have a trainer ready and available at every practice. The athletes know they're allowed to take breaks. And additionally, I attend conferences from different associations throughout the year.
Now, I want to focus on something you said just a moment ago. You mentioned that you have a trainer. Who is that trainer?
That would be Jess Merriweather.
And to your knowledge, what sort of training does she have?
She actually has a master's in athletic training, so she's very qualified to be taking care of athletes.
So with regard to her role in your program, what exactly does she do?
Really, Jess is there in case there's anyone during a practice or a game who needs her. It can kind of happen in 2 ways. Either the athletes all know they can go to her if they feel like something might be wrong or if they're injured, or occasionally I will see an athlete who looks like they are struggling to the point that I would send them to Jess.
So Coach Taylor, let's talk about this case then. Obviously, you know that the plaintiff has brought this suit against you for the death of her daughter, Rory Street. Who was Rory Street to you?
Yeah, I mean, all of the kids on that varsity team are like children to me, and Rory was no different. She was extremely talented player. It was a privilege to coach her, and it really was devastating what happened.
Do you recall the practice of September 7th, 2018?
Yeah, it's hard to talk about, but I do remember it.
Well, on the practice that day, do you think that you were really pushing Miss Street?
I mean, that's my job. They're varsity soccer players. These girls are athletes who a lot of them want to go on and play D1 sports. So yeah, I was pushing, but that's what I do.
When you were pushing her that day, at any point, did you know that she was overheating?
No, I had no idea.
Had you known that she was overheating, what would you have done?
Well, in that situation, I would have sent her to Jess, and I'm sure that she would have been taken care of.
Okay, before getting into more of the details about that day, I want to focus just a bit more on your relationship with Miss Street. How well did you know her?
I'd like to think I knew her pretty well.
Did you know that she had cocaine in her system before practice that day?
Absolutely not. I had no idea.
Did you know anything about drug use on or before September 7th?
No, I knew nothing about that.
On September 7th at that practice, did she ever tell you that she was using drugs?
No, she did not.
Would you have ever thought to look and check to see if she was using drugs?
No, absolutely not. I never would have thought that a high school athlete who I thought that I knew well would have been under the influence.
Coach Taylor, had she told you that she was under the influence of cocaine, would you have still let her practice that day?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, aside from it not being allowed on campus or at all, I would never have allowed a player who's under the influence to come to one of our practices knowing how rigorous they are.
Now, let's talk a bit about Miss Street's performance. How was she doing that day on the field?
Well, it was just an off day for her. She wasn't performing up to her abilities. She was goofing off and just kind of dogging it in general. She was missing passes, not in the right position, and just missing shots that she usually would be making.
Do you recall roughly how close or far you were standing to her throughout the practice that day?
Yeah, I was always about 20 or 30 yards from her during the scrimmage.
Were you close enough that you could see her pretty clearly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, during that practice, the scrimmage, did you notice anything off about her appearance that day?
No, she wasn't sweating more than any of the other players and nothing seemed off. It was like a normal practice.
Was she, when you saw that she was goofing off that day, did you do anything to sort of remedy that behavior?
Yeah, I mean, these are teenage girls. They get distracted, they have off days, and occasionally we have to implement disciplinary types of drills to make sure that they get back on focus and can perform to their full ability.
So what did you do to get her back on focus?
Well, at Waco High, we have a tradition. As has been mentioned before today, we have something called Burma Road. I even did it when I was at Waco High in the 90s, and it's really just a pretty normal soccer conditioning drill.
Refresh our memory. What does that drill involve?
So Burma Road is really just if a player isn't performing well or is not paying attention, as Rory was that day, they'll run and then dribble, make a shot, and then they have to bear crawl back to the beginning, and they do that again until I tell them to stop.
At any point during that drill, when she was running, did she ask you for water?
No, she did not.
At any point, did she ask you if she could take a break?
No, she didn't.
Did she do anything at that time that indicated to you she was starting to overheat?
No, she didn't.
Did she ever ask you if she could see the trainer while she was running that drill?
No, she never asked that.
Now let's move on to something else that we talked about, that we heard about earlier today, that is. the slide tackle drill. Why did you have Miss Street run that drill?
Yeah, well, during Burma Road, a lot of times that gets the player back on focus, but that just wasn't working for Rory that day. She was still goofing off, still dogging it, missing shots, and just not, again, performing up to her ability. So I decided that she needed another disciplinary drill, not only to help the team work on a skill, but to get her focus back in line. So I did a slide tackle scrimmage drill with the team.
Now, had you ever done this kind of drill before?
No, but it's normal to implement new drills in coaching. I've been doing it for 26 years, so.
Have your teams practiced slide tackling before, at least?
Absolutely. It's a very typical, normal part of the game of soccer.
During this slide tackling drill, at that point, did Miss Street ever stop and ask you if she could have some water?
No.
At that point, did she ever ask you if she could take a break?
No, she didn't.
In that final drill that she did she ever say anything to you at all that indicated she was overheating?
No.
Had she said something to you at the time of that drill, would you have stopped it?
Absolutely. If Rory had not been feeling well and she had voiced that to me, that's why the trainer is there. That's why we have water on the side. I would have absolutely let her take a break or see the trainer.
In all of your years of coaching, have any of your players ever died from doing any of your drills?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have nothing further at this time, and I pass the witness.
Ms. Tap Antonio Cross,
Yes, Your Honor.
proceed when you're ready.
Coach Taylor, you got quite the record as a coach, don't you?
I think that I've done pretty well.
Well, you've got 5 district championships.
Yes.
2
We're winning.
teams went to regional finals.
Yes.
A team that made it all the way to state semifinals.
Yes.
All that's left on your resume is a state championship, isn't that right?
Excuse me?
All that's left on your resume is for you to win a state championship, right? That's the only thing you haven't won yet.
Sure.
Now, and you were hoping for that state championship during the fall of 2018, right? Every coach would.
I guess that every season that I've been coaching for 26 years, the goal is to get the kids to win a state championship.
Of course, because that's exciting.
That would be exciting for the kids.
Okay, so let's talk about your job as a coach. Right, you're the adult on the field, isn't that right?
Yeah, it's just Jess, Merriweather, and I.
The 2 of you pick when breaks happen.
Well, we can mandate a break, but I've expressed to the girls and they know that they can take a break whenever they need to take one.
Of course, but it's ultimately your responsibility to tell them when they can take a break, right?
I can tell them when they can take a break.
When practice is over,
Yes.
right? And you're responsible for the safety of these kids.
Yes.
So that means that you stay up to date with all the information in the coaching world.
Of course.
You attend coaching clinics several times a year.
Yes.
You keep yourself up to date with coaching techniques.
Yeah. I like to hear what other coaches are doing to try to get myself to be better.
Right. So you went to one of those annual meetings of the Texas High School Coaching Associations. That was in June.
I did.
That was just 3 months before Rory's death.
Sure. Yeah.
And at that meeting, they showed you a PowerPoint.
Yes.
You'd recognize that PowerPoint if I put it up, right?
Sure.
Your Honor, permission to publish Exhibit 11.
You may.
Now, Coach, take a look at this PowerPoint. This is the PowerPoint that was published to you at this coaches meeting, right?
Yeah, it was a conference for the Texas High School Coaches Association. That was it, I think.
It's in the same or substantially, or it's a fair and accurate depiction of what they showed you while you're there.
Yeah.
Your Honor, at this time we offer into evidence what's been pre-marked for identification as plaintiff's 11.
Your Honor, we do have an objection, both in this case to hearsay.
Ms. Tap Antonio, do you have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. We're not offering this for the truth of the matter asserted. What we're offering to this is to show that the coach was put on notice of several regulations and suggestions to coaches all across the state of Texas.
Mr. Wallach, anything further?
Your Honor, in that case, then it has no relevance. This coach has already said that this is not the only thing that she reviews in establishing the rules to her practices. She goes and reviews different materials from different organizations and has coached from 20 years in order to come to the practices that she does. So this single slide from one conference that she attended would have no relevant value today.
Your objections overruled. Exhibit 11 is admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, before we take a look at what you learned in this conference, I want to talk about the Texas Association of Soccer Coaches. These are soccer coaches all across the state of Texas.
Is that a question?
Yes.
Yes.
They can be anywhere from high school age to college age.
Yeah.
And they are talking about new techniques, right, to bring awareness to what coaches could or should be doing at practices.
It's really kind of just like a networking thing and suggestions, other coaches, things they may have noticed that worked for them, kind of coming together to see what works or what doesn't work.
Right. It's best practices for coach.
Sure.
Okay, let's take a look at what they had to say were the best practices. Looking at the second page of this exhibit, you see where it says temperatures reach 100 degrees or above. I want to take a look at that area.
Okay.
Right. Just to be clear, it was 105 degrees on the day that Rory passed away. Isn't that right?
I'm not aware exactly what the weather was that day.
Well, you've been in this meeting the entire day.
Yes.
You saw us publish the weather statement.
Yes.
You saw that little 105 degree Fahrenheit right next to it.
Yes, it was triple digits that day and that afternoon, as it typically is in September in Texas.
Yeah, Coach, we can certainly agree it was hot. So what this says is that practices, it suggests that you should have a water break about every 15 minutes of practice. You see that?
Yes, it does say that.
It also says shade if possible.
It does say that, yes.
It also says water should be available to players during practices.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're done taking a look at that for now. Let's talk about how that translates to your practices. We already talked about it was 105 degrees. But now, as you sit here today, what you can't tell us is if Rory got a water break every 15 minutes. That's a question.
I can tell you that she did not choose to take a water break every 15 minutes of practice.
I'm not asking if she chose. I'm asking if you told her to go take a water break every 15 minutes. And the answer to that question is no.
No, I would not have done that. Again, those are suggestions, and that's not the way that I run my practice.
And you didn't suggest that Rory take a water break after 30 minutes. Isn't that right?
No.
So let's talk about the care you showed Rory that day. Now, Rory, as you've said, she's one of your star players.
Yeah, absolutely. She was.
She's got talent.
Yes, she
In the
did.
past, you've described her as having a superhuman ability.
Yeah.
But on September 7th, something was up with Rory.
Well, she just was distracted as teenage girls can be sometimes.
Right. Well, she was missing passes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
She wasn't as fast as normal.
I would say maybe not necessarily that, but she was just kind of seemed like she was goofing around a lot.
Well, your superstar athlete, she was missing wide open shots.
Yeah.
And that was unusual to you, right?
It wasn't necessarily unusual, like I said, for teenage girl athletes to have off days and need to be disciplined.
Well, in your words, in your past deposition, you said something was different with Rory that day.
Yeah, she has great athletic ability, and it was different for her to not be performing up to those standards.
And it upset you, didn't it, Coach?
It didn't necessarily upset me. Like I said, it's typical. It was disappointing because I wanted Rory to have the opportunity to go to a D1 school and get scholarships, and I knew if she played like she was practicing, that wouldn't happen for her.
Well, Coach, in the past, you've actually said that this caused you to heat up. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very passionate about these kids.
But at no point did you call your star player over and ask, hey, are you okay?
No.
At no point did you make any inquiry to see what might have been wrong?
No.
No, instead you sent her to that Burma road, right?
Yes.
In your words, you wanted to teach her a lesson.
I thought that she needed discipline that day. She wasn't acting like herself.
I'm not asking what you thought. I'm asking what you said. And you said you wanted to teach her a lesson.
Okay.
And the way you taught your best player the lesson is by making her sprint 30 yards, dribble another 30 yards, and bear crawl. Isn't that right?
Yes.
The total 120 yards
Yes.
over the length of a football field.
Or close to a soccer field.
And she didn't have to just do it once, right? She did it until you said stop.
Yeah, just like every other player who has to do it.
And Rory wasn't doing well on the Burma Road that day either.
No, she was still just very distracted, goofing up, just kind of dogging it.
And that's when you decided you had to discipline her more.
Yeah, I thought that she needed another drill.
For her own good. Those
Yeah.
are your words, not mine, Coach.
I didn't argue with you.
Now, Burma Road, it wasn't enough, so you came up with a new way to discipline Rory, right?
Yeah, I just implemented a slide tackle drill.
Slide tackle drill you'd never done before.
Yeah.
Now, before we talk about the nature of this drill, I want to go back to that presentation, Exhibit 11. Now, that page 3. Can you see that, Coach?
Yes, I can.
Now, this talks about slide tackling, right?
It does.
It says only use slide tackling when necessary.
Yes.
It says may cause serious injury.
Well, it says when it's done incorrectly.
I'm looking right there at the third point. It says causes serious injury to an opponent.
Yes, when it's mistimed or poorly executed.
Okay. Now, let's go back to questioning about this slide tackling. We're done with this presentation. Thank you. Now, you came up with this slide tackling drill because in your words, slide tackles, they're hard tackles, right?
Yes.
Lots of physical conduct.
Yeah, like the rest of the sport.
So you wanted to make sure that Rory, that she got the point.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that she knew that she couldn't act that way at practice.
So the way you did that is that you had each player line up. Is that right?
Yes.
And one by one, each player would come at Rory and perform a slide tackle. Is that right?
Yes.
Knock her to the ground.
Yes.
You just tell me if I'm explaining this wrong, Coach.
No,
Now, you did that 10 times. Rory was knocked to the ground.
it was actually, I think it was performed about 14, 15 times.
Right. And on that 15th time, you actually had to pick Rory up off the ground, right?
Yeah, I helped her up.
Because she couldn't stand on her own.
I don't know that. I helped her up though.
And as she's struggling to get up, you don't look at Rory and say, hey, I think you might have had enough. Right, Coach?
Yes. No, I did not.
You don't say, Rory, why don't you go get some water?
I did not.
No, you point at your next player and you say, go ahead, have at her.
After the 15th time?
Well, let's talk about the 14th time, that last and final time.
Okay.
You sent another player.
Okay. Sorry.
Excuse me, sorry, there's a bit of a lag. You sent another player. That
It
15th time.
happened about 14, 15 times before.
All right, okay. You know what, Coach, I'm talking about the last time you sent the player. And on the last time you sent the player, Rory, she didn't get up, did she?
No, she didn't.
No further questions.
Brief redirect, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Zhao, can you republish Exhibit 11, please? Now, Coach, you said that your students can ask you for a break or get water at any time. So I want to run a hypothetical with you real quick.
Okay.
This says that practices must include a 5-minute break every 30 minutes if it's 96 to 99 degrees.
Yes.
Let's say it's that temperature. Your player asks you for a break every 20 minutes. Do you give it to them?
Yes.
Every 10?
Yes.
Would you give them a break every 5 minutes if they ask for it?
Absolutely.
When temperatures are above 100 degrees, it says there that it has to include a 5-minute break every 15 minutes. Now, would you still give players a break less than 15 minutes if they ask for it?
Absolutely. The players know that they can take breaks anytime they ask me.
Thank you, Mrs. Zhao. You can take this down. Now, Coach, did Rory ever ask you that afternoon at any point if she could take a break?
No, she did not.
Did she ever ask you at any point that afternoon if she could have water?
No, she did not.
Did she ever give you any reason to think that she wasn't okay that afternoon?
No, she didn't.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have nothing further. Barring any recross, may this witness be excused.
Any recross, Ms. Pack, continue?
No recross, Your Honor.
Coach Taylor, you can step down.
And Your Honor, at this time, we have no further live witnesses. However, I would like to read portions of deposition testimony from Jess Merriweather, the trainer, onto the record. Ms. Merriweather has been stipulated in this case by both parties to be unavailable, and I have shown these portions to opposing counsel. I understand she doesn't have any objection to my reading it at this time.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I have my co-counsel turn on her camera and read the responses as I read the questions?
Yes, go ahead with that.
Good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
How old are you, Jess?
I'm 28 years old.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco, Texas.
How long have you lived in Waco?
Just a couple years now. I grew up in Houston, then I went to Texas A&M for undergrad, and then I got a master's degree in sports training from A&M as well. After that, I worked for a couple years at another high school in College Station before I got the job at Waco High.
And what is your job at Waco High?
I'm an athletic trainer, and I also teach health.
What is the job of an athletic trainer at a high school?
We have various teams and activities at the school that involve some level of physical activity and competition. Everything from football to soccer to volleyball to cheerleading and drill team. As a trainer, I work with the students that participate in those activities to keep them healthy and in shape, and to treat any injuries that they have.
Do you attend the practices?
Yes, depending on what time of year it is, it may be football or soccer or something else, but there's always a trainer at any official practice for our various athletic teams.
Now moving to page 8, line 8 of that deposition. Were you at practice the day Rory died?
I was.
Did you see Rory running Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching her closely.
Did you see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw that it was happening, and I certainly saw parts of it, but I didn't watch it closely.
What were you doing while all of this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
At any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in a way that would have indicated she was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me. And here's the thing, I'm there to take care of those players and they know it. I'm kind of a combination trainer and guardian to the team. So they trust me and I trust them to tell me if something is wrong or if they're hurting. Rory didn't say a word, and she would have. Rory was a tough kid, but she knew her limits and would let me or coach know when she needed water.
Are players allowed to get water when they want it?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
Your Honor, that concludes the highlighted portions of this witness's testimony that we'd like to read onto the record. I understand that opposing counsel may want to read some onto the record as well.
Staff Antonio, do you have any cross?
No, Your Honor.
Then with that, Your Honor, the defense rests our case in chief, and we renew our motion for judgment as a matter of law.
We're going to deny your motion for a judgment as a matter of law. Ms. Staff Antonio, do you have anything further, or do you rest and close?
We rest and ready to close. We asked for just a brief recess. Well, perhaps while you tally the time.
Yes, we'll take 3 minutes, and then I will give you, we'll start closing arguments at 3:29.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, are the parties ready for closing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Plaintiff, you have 23 minutes and 9 seconds remaining. Defense, you have 24 minutes and 9 seconds.
Your Honor, may I reserve any remaining time for rebuttal?
You may. You can close when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Secret, effect, and silence. That's what opposing counsel told you this case was about at the beginning of the trial. And perhaps it is. You see, the real secret is Coach Taylor's secret anger. that comes to the surface at times. And its effect? Students want to avoid that anger at all times because they know she'll punish them. So what's the silence then? They won't ask for water. They won't ask for a break because they fear what she might do. See, at the beginning of this trial, I told you that it didn't have to be this way. And now you've seen all the evidence, you've heard all the testimony, you know what I told you is true. It didn't have to be this way. But the conditions, the contact, the lack of care, change any of them. And it's likely that Rory would be watching this Zoom meeting, not the subject of one. See, make no mistake, the moment we entered this courtroom, we took on a burden to prove that the defendant is responsible for Rory's death based on a preponderance of the evidence. And we've absolutely met that burden. See, you saw today that it was the defendant that controlled the conditions, the defendant that controlled wave after wave of contact that Rory suffered in that slide tackling drill. It was the defendant alone that is responsible for her lack of care for a star athlete. See, she broke a woman, a young woman. And we're left to pick up those pieces. That's why you're here. Your Honor, it should be clear to you by now that the facts and the law demand that this defendant be held responsible. So let's walk through the evidence that we've seen today. Talk about how exactly we've met this burden. The first thing that we had to show you is that this defendant failed to act with ordinary care. What does that mean? It means what would a reasonable coach have done? Now, to prove that, we brought an eyewitness, Aubrey Saracen, best friends to Rory since they were both little. She was right by Rory's side when they both ran the Burma Run on that hot September. And that day, Aubrey saw her friend struggling. In fact, struggling, those were the same words used by Coach Taylor. Aubrey saw that she was pale, breathing heavy, not herself. She had chest pains. But before Aubrey could even help, Coach Taylor demands that Rory come back and face the humiliation, the physical torture of a brand new drill where each team member flings himself at Rory, all in the name of a slide tackle. See, slide tackling, it's a normal part of soccer. Yes, we understand that. That's true. But being knocked to the ground over and over and over again, that is what wasn't normal. Being knocked to the ground when you barely have the strength to stand, Your Honor, that's not normal. Coach Taylor saw Rory was struggling, but she did nothing. She didn't get her water. She didn't ask a trainer for help. She didn't even let Rory catch her breath. Coach Taylor just stared and watched with sick pleasure as a firing squad of players tackled Rory to the ground over and over again. And if she stayed on that ground for too long, well, Coach would simply yank her back up and throw one more player at her, all in the name to teach her a lesson. See, Coach Taylor's anger, her secret anger, blinded her from seeing a young girl in trouble. Her anger justified the fact that the color was vanishing from Rory's face. Her anger made her send wave after wave of player to punish this girl who was suffering a heat stroke right in front of her very eyes. And now she had the audacity to say what she was doing was simply discipline. That all Rory need do is ask. That all my players can get water whenever they want. Your Honor, when Coach was testifying, she was essentially saying that she had no control over practice. That kids could get water whenever they want. Do you really think that's reasonable? Do you really think that that's what's happened? See, does a reasonable coach demand that a student continually run sprints in 105-degree weather with no breaks? Does a reasonable coach tell a young lady that she needs to run until she passes out? Does a reasonable coach force teammates to slam into one another just to teach them a lesson? Absolutely not. Your Honor, Coach Taylor, she's not a United States military general. She's a high school soccer coach. I understand it's one thing to push her team to be better. It's one thing to teach growth in these young women. Mentors, they do that. But Coach Taylor wasn't Rory's mentor. In the end, Coach Taylor was Rory's tormentor. She wasn't helping these girls be better soccer players. She was treating them as if they'd sign up for Navy SEAL training, and that this was Hell Week, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees, to tackle one another, belittling them if they showed any signs of weakness. See, what she should have done was lifted them up in encouragement, but instead, Coach lifted Rory up by her shirt so she could suffer her next hit. See, Coach Taylor, she actively placed this young woman in harm's way. Damn the consequences. Your Honor, that is the deviation of care here. See, the worst part is Coach Taylor knew better. She even told you. We saw it on those slides. See, these slides, they're the rules that Texas coaches have agreed on. That in 100-degree weather, you should have water breaks. Water breaks every 15 minutes. And that slide tackling, only slide tackle when it's absolutely necessary. So was slide tackling necessary here? No. In fact, on that PowerPoint, it says directly that slide tackling can cause injury. So, Your Honor, the moment that Coach read these slides, she was putting on notice that Rory's death, that it was foreseeable. Because slide tackles weren't necessary that day. There was no indication that these kids needed to learn how to slide tackle or that they weren't doing it correctly. There's no evidence that this was an effective discipline technique. Rather, it was a punishment. So don't let Coach Taylor sit here and tell you that she followed the standards of care when she doesn't even follow basic suggestions that we saw in that PowerPoint. See, the defendant absolutely abused that standard of care. But that's not always shown. See, the evidence today has made it clear that the death of this innocent girl was foreseeable. It was a foreseeable outcome of Coach Taylor's actions. It was the conditions, the contact, the lack of care combined together that made this foreseeable, made it inevitable. Because was it reasonably foreseeable for a young person to have a heat stroke in 105-degree weather? Yes. Was it reasonably foreseeable that a young person could have a stroke in 105-degree weather while sprinting and crawling without a water break? Of course. Was it reasonably foreseeable that forcing a weak player to endure hit after hit could eventually cause her body to shut down entirely? It's absolutely foreseeable. In fact, it happened. See, even if your own sense doesn't see it, well, our experts did. We weren't able to bring him to get here today because of the coronavirus, but his report isn't any less valuable. See, he's the only one that you've heard from today that's a medical doctor. He's got over 30 years of experience, and you're gonna have the opportunity to take that expert report and look at it. And what it'll tell you is that the symptoms of a heat stroke are unusual paleness, struggle, sweating. That's exactly what we saw here today. Convulsions, lifelessness. See, not only does a heat stroke do that, but it causes muscles to break down. It causes fluids in the brain to start swelling, causes sudden cardiac arrest, just like we saw with Rory. There's no question what caused this. What the defense has done is argue that, just wait a minute, this kid was doing cocaine. It had to be the cocaine. That had to be what done it. It was her fault. But understand that the defense lacks so much evidence to support their case that what they're doing is resorting to blaming a dead teenager for this. And how can you blame Rory? This teenager is under immense pressure to perform. She acted out once. The only medical doctor in this case is going to tell you that the cocaine, it wasn't the issue. And that's because there was only a small amount of drugs in her system. You'll see that right there on the expert report. And you know what, Your Honor, even if there was cocaine in her system, even if there was or there wasn't, regardless, Coach Taylor was there. She saw a kid struggling to breathe. She saw a kid barely holding on, barely able to get herself off the ground. And despite it, she sent the next player to knock her over. You see, not all secrets are dangerous. This secret that the defense suggests that Rory had, the cocaine alone, it wouldn't have killed Rory. It was the combination with the overheating, the exertion, and that was all Coach Taylor. See, if she had just gotten a break, if she had just seen the signs, Rory would have been alive today. It didn't have to be this way. The conditions that Rory was in, the contact that she was subjected to, the complete lack of care by this defendant, that is why we're here today, not because of the cocaine in her system. And when you see this verdict sheet, when you look at question 1, you're going to have to answer the question of is Coach Taylor responsible for this? And the only answer to this question is yes. Because a mother lost her defendant because of lost her child because of the defendant's actions. And when you even question it, think back to who controlled the conditions, who commanded the contact, and who showed a blatant lack of care for a child's life. And when you think of all those 3 things together, you'll only have your answer that, of course, the defendant is liable. So we ask that you find her liable. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I again take just a moment to set up my well for closing argument?
You may.
Thank you. And may I proceed?
You may.
We agree. Miss Street died all too young. Nothing that we've said throughout trial today minimizes the sadness her loss has brought to her family, her friends, her teammates. We agree that she died from heat exhaustion. We agree that she died during a soccer practice. We even agree that Coach Taylor could have acted differently that day, could have been better. But where we disagree, Your Honor, the issue that this entire case turns on today is that Coach Taylor is not responsible for Miss Street's death. Because Miss Street was keeping a secret, a deadly secret, a secret that did, in fact, go on to kill her. Coursing through her veins that day at practice was cocaine, a dangerous drug that amplified every risk she took that day. Her secret, the one thing that no one saw, that's what killed her, not Coach Taylor. Now, the plaintiff had the burden throughout today's trial. They had to prove to you not only that Coach Taylor owed Miss Street a duty, but that she had to act with ordinary care and that her conduct had to be the proximate cause of her tragic death. It's that last element that's at issue, Your Honor. Because as the court is aware, in order to be the proximate cause of something, Coach Taylor had to be able to foresee the harm that would come to Miss Street. But it was what no one could see that killed her. And that becomes clear when you revisit those 3 things I wanted you to hold on to throughout trial today. First, the secret. Second, the effect. And third, the silence. So let's revisit that first point, the secret. On September 7th, 2018, the cause of Rory Street's death didn't start on the soccer field. It didn't start during the Burma Road drill. It didn't start during that slide tackle drill at the end of the day. It started before she'd even laced up her cleats and left the locker room. Your Honor, it started the moment that she took cocaine. By the time she went out to the soccer field that day, it was already floating through her bloodstream. And she kept that secret. She didn't tell one soul. You heard today, she didn't tell her coach. She didn't tell her trainer. She didn't even tell her best friend. Rory Street, by all accounts, she'd always been a great kid. No juvenile record, no after-school detention, no major behavioral problems. Nothing that she did ever led her coach to think that she was trouble. Nothing led her coach to believe that Miss Street would use drugs. Nothing about what Miss Street put in her body on September 7th was foreseeable to Coach Taylor. And Your Honor knows that because every single witness today told the same story. No one could quite believe that Rory Street was that kind of student. And yet, based on the blood drawn from her body hours after her death, based on the toxicology report, we know that she tested positive for 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine. Now, it's not our place to judge Ms. Street for what she put in her body. Whether we agree with her choice or not, that's not an issue today. But what we do have to be able to acknowledge is that that choice to keep the substance in her system secret, well, that changed the way that people interacted with her. It changed the things that they asked of her. And that's what takes us to our second point, the effect. Now, make no mistake, it wasn't just cocaine that led to Ms. Street's death. Like I said at the beginning of the case and just a few moments ago, it was the effect of cocaine that was so far-reaching. And you don't just have to take my word for it. Your Honor, you have an expert report from Spencer London, the toxicologist in this case. Now, his opinion is clear. The cocaine was part of the reason that Ms. Street died. It was the effect of the cocaine that exacerbated everything Ms. Street was going through that afternoon. If you look at the effects of cocaine on the body that's listed in that same report, the symptoms are very serious. Cocaine causes nausea, raises body temperature, causes high blood pressure. It creates a fast or irregular heartbeat, causes tremors, creates chest pains. But this key point, the effect, it's not just about the effect that the cocaine had on Ms. Street. It's also about the effect her secret had on Coach Taylor. Coach Taylor had no idea what was in Ms. Street's system. And the effect that that had was that Coach Taylor expected her to work just as hard that day as she did at any other practice. Coach Taylor had no idea what was going on just beneath the surface. And now, no doubt, those drills were hard, but they were nothing that Ms. Street, a superstar athlete, couldn't handle. On any other day, at any other practice, Ms. Street would have been fine. But it was the combination, the effect that Coach Taylor could not have possibly known, foreseen, or even dreamt of that made every grueling exercise that day so much worse for Ms. Street. If she'd said something, anything to Coach Taylor, that whole afternoon would have gone differently. That brings us to our third and final point today, the silence. Now, the evidence made clear today that Coach Taylor pushes his players hard, but also trusts them to know themselves. If at any point they need a break, all they have to do is ask. It doesn't matter if it's every 15 minutes or every 5 minutes. If a player says to them, Coach, I need to stop for a second. Coach, I need some water. Then he lets them. She lets them, no questions asked. When Miss Street was on the practice field that day, all she had to do was ask, Your Honor. Ask for a drink of water. Ask for a break. Coach Taylor would have stopped immediately. Unfortunately, the evidence makes clear that Rory Street stayed silent. And it's not fun, it's not enjoyable for me to tell you that she needed to be the one to speak up, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't point out the ugly reality here. Miss Street never once said, Coach, listen, I made a mistake. I did some cocaine, I'm feeling really bad, and I need help. Since the coach couldn't see what she'd done to herself, the coach didn't know what was going to happen. No one did. Now, Your Honor, I'm not going to stand here today and ask you to be unreasonable. We've never held the position that Coach Taylor did nothing wrong. Let's give the plaintiff the benefit of the doubt just for argument's sake. Now, even if you believe somehow that the plaintiff did meet their burden in this case, there's still a second question that the court needs to answer. Because this is a comparative negligence jurisdiction, and because we raised an affirmative defense, the question that you need to decide today is whether the coach's conduct was 51% or more responsible for Miss Street's death. I'm not going to be unreasonable, and I won't ask you to be unreasonable, Your Honor. If you do get to this question, we don't expect you to find Coach Taylor 0% at fault. That wouldn't be fair. But if you do get to this question, the defense has a reasonable answer. Opposing counsel said just a moment ago that 60 nanograms per milliliter was a small amount. But if you read the expert report, you'll see that 5 milligrams is actually classified as small. Miss Street had 12 times that amount in her system. Every nanogram of cocaine in her body contributed to that heat stroke. Recall that there were 60 nanograms found hours after the fact. Every nanogram increasing the risk to her life, increasing the risk of heat stroke. And keeping in mind those 60 nanograms, I ask that you find Miss Street 60% liable for her death and find the defendant not liable.
Ms. Capantonia, you have 12 minutes and 2 seconds remaining.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Your Honor, understand what the defense is asking you to do. Understand what the defense has just told you to do. They told you to blame Rory for not begging for a break. They're saying that while Rory was down on the ground on her hands and knees, hell, she should have looked up at coach and begged for a water break. Should have looked up at coach from her position on the floor and begged for a break. But Your Honor, this wasn't Rory's field. This wasn't Rory's practice. Rory was a high school girl. This was coach's field. This was coach's team. This was coach's drill. This was coach's decision. You can't put an 18-year-old girl up against a person in a position of power and tell them that they should have spoken. See, this entire time they've said Rory was silent. She didn't say anything. She didn't need anything. You know who else was silent? Was Coach. Coach didn't ask, hey, you don't look so good. Maybe you should take a break. Coach was silent. She never said, hey, Rory, are you going to be okay? No, instead, what she did was line up a group of 15 girls, point at them, and say, on to the next. And now what she's doing, because she's run out of players, she's pointing at Rory and saying, this is your fault. You're responsible for your own death. Don't let the defense say this. You know, they can say they don't want to be unreasonable all they want, but listen to what he said to you. Because the very nature of the arguments, the very nature of the reason why he's suggesting we're here today is completely unreasonable. And that's why we ask to look at the facts, to understand what happened here, and to find the defendant liable for her actions, because an 18-year-old girl is dead because this defendant didn't speak up, didn't give a child help. Find the defendant liable.
All right, and court is now in recess. First of all, good job, both of you. That was a great round.
Thank you.
I do need to ask everyone who is in the room to stay in the Zoom meeting until we have confirmation that all of the ballots have been submitted. If you are a scoring judge, go ahead and send that ballot once you've completed it back to Robert. And as soon as he comes and lets me know that all of the ballots are in, I will come back and say y'all are free to go.